Parker McCullum. Burn It Down Tour 2024, June 27th, Wells Fargo Arena. ACM Best New Artist, Parker McCullum Live, with special guest Corey Kent. Finally got a handle on you. What in the hell does a man? On sale now at iowaeventcenter.com. Parker McCullum Live. Scott Dochterman, Chad Leistikow, together on one pod, talking Hawks and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners, exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. It is a Friday edition of Legends and Listeners, episode 45. I am Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, joined by Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. Scott, we've got a fun show planned today. Not a lot going on in the way of news, but, it's one of those days where it feels like Hawkeye football is creeping closer. We had some Hawkeye football availability this week. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the playoffs. Playoffs?
Are you kidding me? Playoffs?
maybe later in the show. And you've been out of town this week, huh?
Yeah, we had some meetings with The Athletic. Once a year, we get together. We call it our summit. And we kind of go all over the place. Well, this year we went to the mothership, the New York Times, down on Times Square. And we were there from Monday through today. And I was there long. I was in LaGuardia for way too long, but alas, that's not part of the story. But no, we talked about all kinds of issues with the sports, how we're going to cover them, what we're going to do differently, and really kind of building up to what we'll talk about, later in the show, this college football playoff. It is the topic that dominated our conversation because one thing for a national outlet like ourselves, we're talking about significantly more resources now that have to be applied to covering a playoff rather than a 4-team playoff, which is 3 games. Now you're you got 4-4-2-1. So now we've got 8 more games, bowl games, and are a part of the quarterfinals, but then home campuses and the buildup, will be unlike anything we've ever seen before for the last half to a third of the season. So that was our primary discussion. We talked a lot about basketball and NIL and that, and getting everybody together in one room once a year. It's a good thing. Yeah,
that sounds, you're right. It is changing. It is changing this year. It's good to remind people, I feel like, that this is the playoff era. It's going to be different this year. Just how we see the whole season is different, and it's going to affect your coverage. It's going to affect our coverage. A lot of stuff going on. I do want to remind folks we are coming to you live from the Channel Seed Studios here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. And I guess, to kind of get started, Scott, I give credit to you here. We've got we decided to go kind of 3 questions surrounding this Iowa football team. We had some availability this week. Kind of I guess the idea is questions we need to get answered and when maybe we can get those answers about this team. Maybe some of it is repeat, but they're just so important that I feel like we should dive into them. And I give Scott the credit for putting these together. So number 1 on the list, Scott, is probably the one I'm most excited to talk about. And this is a good one. I like the wording here. Can Tim Lester fix the passing game to at least make it passable? So obviously that's a big question, pun intended there by Scott.
Yeah.
It's a big question, but what are we looking for? What are we looking for here to feel like we can get a positive answer to this? And when can we kind of feel like we've got an answer to this?
For Iowa football to be successful, Chad, outside of wins and losses, really there are 8 key markers that I have found and determined over the years that matter. It's not total offense. It's not total defense. It's necessarily. There are 4 of them on offense, and 3 of them touch this category in different ways. Completion percentage, third down third down conversion percentage, and then red zone touchdown percentage. And first, to me, the most important one for the passing game specifically is completion percentage. Last year, they were 132nd in the country at 48.9%. Above, I don't even know who they were above, but that's just gross. You can't win championships with that. You can win games. We saw it. I mean, but Iowa is the outlier with that. It's not a given. So what they have to do, and they will have a major upgrade at quarterback, with Cade McNamara back, is complete passes. You have to go back, Chad, to 2015 to find the last time somebody completed more than 60% in a season. That was Beathard, and the team completed 61.5%. If you can get to 60%, which is kind of the number that they've circled for a long time, and that's winning football. Now, in this scheme, there's going to be more completions. We know that, bubble screens, quick passes, zone read throws, that leads to more completions, which is a good thing. If it can exceed 60%, Chad, I think that is more than passable for this offense.
Well, the team below them, by the way, was Rutgers.
Okay.
So, yeah. Army and Navy just ahead of them. So, it's definitely – it seems like it's a priority for Tim Lester. Seems like a strength of Cade McNamara's, but this is definitely one where you got to see it to believe it. And I'm seeing that just anything we're reporting on the offense. It's just like, well, we'll see. We'll see. Hey, I think the offensive line is going to be better. Well, we'll see. And that's all fair. It's all fair. I do feel like, I'm optimistic that this is, that part is going to get upgraded. It just has to. I mean, it just has to. It's just the scheme was just so, blah the last couple of years. But to me, I think the answer, I feel like here's where I'm looking, Scott, for when we feel like we're going to maybe have some answers. And I want to give Tim Lester, as plenty of time here, but there is urgency as we're going to discuss with the playoff and with his team having so much back. But I feel like game 4 against Minnesota to me is going to be a real litmus test, I feel like, because I felt decent about the offense last year through 3 games. Even without Luke Lachey, it's like, they got a shot at Happy Valley. Even with Cade, that was a Cade McNamara offense, and that was awful.
Yeah.
Was awful. And so that first Big Ten game, even if it looks okay through 3, I don't want to get ahead of myself or ourselves. I feel like let's see how it looks through 4 games, through that Big Ten opener up in Minnesota. I'm not going to say it's like that's the defining moment, but I feel like at that point maybe we'll have more answers because that's when we started getting answers last year.
Yeah, you got to make a great point. I mean, Minnesota has major importance. I won't say they're Ohio State's clearly the best team they're going to play, and I think Iowa State might be number 2 right now. But Minnesota, it's the Big Ten opener, against your most played rival, and we all know what happened last year. And it's going to be up there. It's more than likely going to be at night. And in fact, I would be shocked if it's not a night game in Minneapolis. So that's where it's set right now. Things can't change. But so at any rate, by then, a third of the way through the season, you better see some progress. You better see this is the semblance of what we've got. It doesn't mean they can't have struggles and growing pains and challenges and stuff, but you got to see it kind of tip. And I think the passing game, Chad, I think that they need 4 receivers that they have a lot of trust in, and maybe 1 to 2 more that they have faith in. And meaning that, hey, I think this guy can do it is the faith part of it. I know this guy can do it is the trust part of it. And I think none of them have earned the full trust yet. I think Caleb Brown, it comes the closest, but that's like, by the end of the year, he was like a glass of water in the desert. It's just like, well, okay, he looks good because he's somebody. He's doing something,
right.
you know. But if you have him, Seth Anderson, Caden Weegan, Jacob Gill, if he makes that step forward, what about a Jarrett Bowie or a Dayton Howard, maybe even an Alec Wick? I wouldn't even rule out any of the younger ones, the incoming freshmen. I mean, but you really need to get to the point where you trust 4 people, because those are the guys coming in and out, and then think that, there's 1 to 2 we can kind of rotate in depending on the situation and just get them some snaps, especially against, the opener, for instance. Although that's weird because Illinois State, they'll blow them out, but you also need to keep the regular offense on the field as much as you can, because they play a pretty good team the next week, especially defensively. So I don't know. I think if they can get Caleb Brown and Seth Anderson to be the guys with Caden Weegan and maybe Jacob Gill, I think you're going, okay, you're kind of pointed in the right direction. I'm not saying they're good, just get to passable, pass-fail, passable. And then hope, have, faith, I guess, that Bowie or Howard or Alec Wick or Reese Vanderzee or somebody like that can kind of take some snaps and look decent and maybe have a couple of big plays this season.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I think I like that number. I like the 4 number there, Scott. I think it's gonna be hard to get to. But, I mean, I think that's which is sad to say, but they gotta. I mean, it'd be nice to even just have 2 or 3 to start. But yeah, I like Seth Anderson. I like the Seth Anderson reference you made last week. As it's kind of somebody I've forgotten about, honestly, because he hasn't been part of spring ball either the last 2 years. Had that real quick cup of coffee last year early, and that was about it. But seems to have talent. So that's definitely a guy that's possible to be passable, Scott. But obviously you're not counting tight ends in that receiver thing. No. And we do believe that they have good tight ends. Just a little, we're going to try to fold in some of the availability this week that they had. And what we heard about the quarterback so far is Cade McNamara, they're saying he's healthy, doing all the sprints. So that seems to be a good sign. And Brendan Sullivan's just starting to learn the playbook. So Cade certainly got a step up on him so far, at quarterback. We'll learn more, but this is the time of the year where they're trying to get faster and stronger, especially faster. It's a lot of sprinting.
Yeah, it's in the conditioning period. The build period was like January through mid-March. Now it's more the conditioning. Yes, of course, maintaining your strength and your weight, through the summer, because you're going to be running outside. As we know, it's humid out. It's gotten pretty warm. So, it's like, hey, you put on 20 pounds, depending on what player you are, let's say 20 pounds from between January and spring break. Now is the time where you maintain that 20 pounds as much as you can. And that's through strength training, but also conditioning. So, Jeb, going on to the next one here, the running game. Do you think that there is an opportunity here? Is it pie in the sky to think that Iowa could start being Iowa again, or at least matching its reputation running the football? Or do you think that, hey, this is, for better or worse, it's the same offensive line we saw largely last year, except for Rusty Feth? But they have 155 career starts returning. And that's not counting Kale Bowroot from North Dakota. Do you think that this team has a chance to take another step? And if so, how?
Yeah, I feel more confident about the run game this year than the pass game based on what we know, Scott. It seems like that the Tim Lester offense does accentuate the idea of trying to achieve big plays in the run game and finding that numbers game in that part of football, offensive football. So I do feel like that's the case. Let me scroll through my stats. Maybe this off of the top of your head, but So we did a bold predictions segment on Hawk Central a couple weeks ago. And I want to say, I think the last time, Scott, that Iowa, gosh, I hate to say this if I'm not 100%, but I think the last time that Iowa rushed for 2,000 yards in a season was 2016. I believe that is accurate, which is crazy.
Yeah, you're probably right on that. I mean, that's the only season that they've ever had 2 1,000-yard backs. And since then, they've kind of gone up and down. They would have hit that in 20, but they didn't play enough games. Here's kind of some of the things I like. And the fourth marker on offense.
I was right on that, by the way. I was right. Okay. Yeah.
Good. Congratulations.
but that's hard to believe.
Yeah.
You haven't hit 2,000 rushing yards in a season for Iowa football in the last 7 seasons. My God, that's terrible. Well, I mean, I know the COVID year they would have hit it, like you said, but man, they got to get. So yes, I think they can. I think they can get 2,000 this year.
I think for me the marker is more yards per carry. Because it's sometimes with 2,000 or another number, it's kind of based on it getting some breakaways. But yards per carry to me is the pendulum that really breaks the defense. And the last 3 years last year was 3.34 yards per carry. The year before was 2.9, and the year before that was 3.4. That's not good enough. That's not close to good enough. They would agree to that too. It doesn't. And the style of play did not give the offensive line a chance. And the sad part is I think they actually have the backs now. I think like in 17 and 18 to an extent, they didn't have those backs. They were, like Ivory Kelly Martin was okay. Torrin Young was okay. Mekhi Sargent was a little bit better than they were, but still kind of in that, it wasn't until Tyler Goodson came along that they really had a better back. But I think these guys are in that similar category as a Tyler Goodson, maybe not as complete, but still, yet they're not given a chance based on the blocking scheme in a newer era because, I'm not going to give them an out because on the cut blocking because they've already known about it. So what do you do differently? Well, since 2020, when they go to a jet sweep, they average 5.5995 yards per carry. Those are great numbers. If they even incorporate jet motion, just simply run the guy in motion at the snap and he fakes and runs 4.35 yards per carry. And then if they decide, what, we're going to run jet motion and then pass out of it, they complete 60.6% of their passes. Though those are solid numbers for this. They just didn't do it enough and then when they didn't do it, everybody knew which way that they were going to go. And then the flow of the linebackers, you can't cut them. So they're able to get it to the point where somebody's trying to hit that stretch. It's like, there's nowhere to go. And it's not their fault. It's really not the lineman's fault either because the defense could do different things. So what I look at with this is he has a lot of motion. Motion creates uncertainty. Motion creates hesitancy at the second level, which enables offensive linemen to get to their spots just a little bit quicker than the other guys. And I think with this veteran offensive line, they're more than capable, if they can beat the guy to the spot, of not only winning that block, but going all Iowa on them, which is get them vertical and then on their ass. That's what Iowa wants to do. I think they're capable of that. It's just the scheme didn't allow them to do that. And as I said, when they incorporated motion, it was successful all those times. And I went through every single game and charted every single time they did it. So I kept it. This isn't PFF numbers. These are Scott's. and so you look at that and you go, you incorporate, now you're bringing in a guy who uses it and knows how to use it and when to use it strategically. And you have a veteran offensive line that is very capable, athletic, can move in space. And then you throw in the tight ends, who I think are more than capable, can do the same thing. You have fast wide receivers. I'm not saying they're good. I'm saying they're fast. They can move. They can play running back, so they can carry the ball if needed or just present that threat. So Whereas I'm exactly with you with the passing game. I don't know. I think they'll be better because they can't be worse. I don't know if they'll be passable. I do think that they could be a very good run team this year for the first time since 2020.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I like that's all great stuff. I like the Scott numbers, which were SDF, Scott Dochterman Football, instead of PFF or something.
Yeah.
Scott's notebook numbers or something. SN. I don't know.
There you go. Well, you do remember like 2020 when they did run Wildcat.
Yeah.
And you had the backfield where you had Tyler Goodson, you had Tyrone Tracy, and you had Amir Smith-Marset. Mm-hmm. All three are on NFL rosters, by the way.
Yeah, right.
And they're all versatile players. And like the last part of the Illinois game, it was like boom, 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 boom. So it's all capable of being there. And then you're not going to lose a lot of players because they're going to like to play in that stuff. So I don't, and so that's why I have faith that Tim Lester, his style. We talked to defensive coaches on the side who said, I think it was 67 games or play scrimmage, that God, the high 50s were the numbers of motion plays, and it created tendency, created hesitancy, created issues, formed gaps.
Not tendency. Yeah,
exactly, against all Iowa tendencies. So if it creates hesitancy and it creates gaps, they do have the running backs to exploit it. That Caleb Johnson could hit the home run. That LaShawn Williams will run somebody over who just can't get into the right position because he's so physical. Or, same thing with Kamari Moulton or Jazz Patterson or your guy, Brevin Dahl, So anyway.
Well, and you made a lot of great points there. One of them that I really like is they have a lot of different guys that can carry the ball, and they probably know that and will deploy that. Terrell Washington Jr., if he's going to line up in the slot, give him a carry or two a game, and by the end of the year, maybe he has 100 yards rushing. And you can keep building. Caden Weechin, again, mentioned as one of the three fastest guys on the team this week by Caleb Brown in the skill position groups. Weechin was one of them. Zach Lutmer was another one.
Hayden Price, that's what I heard.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not counting him in the rotation yet, but hey, he can run. Just get a lot of different guys to football. And here's what I think when we will know this. I feel like we'll know this pretty early in the season. I think this is something we can tell early. Is the offensive line making a difference? Is it, is this motion helping? Are you busting some runs? Are you week 2 against Iowa State, are you controlling the line of scrimmage? Because, Iowa State's a really good team, but, I just was looking at their rushing stats. They're 40th in the country last year in yards per rush allowed. It's good, but you should be able to run against, a team that gives up 3.83 per carry. That's, go do it. I think we'll know pretty early in the season on the running game part, Scott. That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, when you have I will say John Heacock is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, but he also has so much of a history defending Iowa that it's going to be difficult for him to get out of that. He's going to look at, he's going to
have one game of tape. He's going to have one game of tape on it.
Exactly. And you're going to look a little bit at the spring practices from videos that were there, which of course were completely watered down. And so you don't know exactly what you're going to get. And last year, the running game was more than capable. There were some big runs. There were some big blocks. And now with that created, you don't know how you can scheme against it early in the season. So it's I think that you're right, that's kind of the game. Can you run for 4 yards a carry and run at, that kind of a pace? I mean, one of the great stats that I've kept all these years is from 2015 on, if they run for 100 yards in a game, they're 70-9 if they hit the 100-yard mark. If they don't, they're 11-25. So and a lot of those 11s have come in the last few years.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I mean, it was pretty much tried and true for about a 5-year period there. If they hit 100, they win. If they don't, they lose. And they've, because the defense is actually the numbers on the defense are historically great the last couple of years. 2022 was the best. 2023 is very close. That when you have those numbers, then you can keep yourself in, and of course, a great punter too.
Well, before we get to our third question, Scott, this is a great time to say some good words about our presenting sponsor of Legends and Listeners, GameDay Men's Health. Fellas, it is time to get yourself right. Get back in the game with GameDay Men's Health. Yes, that includes testosterone replacement therapy. Low T is super common in men as we get older. Don't want to out anybody, but I'm in an older men's tennis league, and I've been talking about this in tennis league, and they're excited to get, hey, what are you doing with GameDay Men's Health? And it's fun to talk about, because we're in the right direction. GameDay can develop a game plan for you, get you feeling like you're in your 20s again. TRT is great for improving your mood, overall well-being, muscle mass, sexual energy, increase of energy overall, mental aptitude, and just happiness. It's fun to like life. So, and they can also help with weight loss, Scott. So get started with your free private, no obligation consultation. I had my second batch of blood work this last Monday, and things are on the right track. So check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com or call their Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty location.
It's been fantastic thus far. My second batch of blood work is coming up here in a couple of weeks. I can't say enough good things about the way they work around you. It's quick and easy. That's probably as good as anything. A lot of times what I'm doing is I'm scheduling my appointments at 8 a.m. and I'm out at 8:05. Because I know one thing, being men, we hate to go to the doctor, and we hate even more sitting around waiting.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even if we have the phone in our hand, which is a good time waste, we still hate it. But they're cognizant of that. That's why they really cater well to men, because it's in and out. And, any questions, here you go. And voila, and I can feel the effects of it so far. And, now today being all jet lagged and after going to 4 different airports and being on the runway for 3 hours before the mechanical failure was fixed. I'm a little bit down. I could probably use a shot. But I can't say enough good things about GameDay Men's Health right now.
Yeah, and our family's going on a little trip here coming up, and they're gonna send me with the medicine that I need. So it's just like, oh yeah, no problem. They'll take care of it. So very cool. All right, Scott, let's get to our third question here. I should have mentioned. I should have woven in here before we finish. Leishon Williams says he wants to lead the Big Ten in rushing, Scott. That was one of his quotes this week, and he says he wants to score 10 touchdowns. Those are 2 of his goals. And speaking of the offensive line, there was talked to a couple people that did not seem too sad to lose Caden Proctor. just put it that way.
Really?
I mean, it sounded like it was just kind of a disaster, almost a disaster,
Yeah, there were, I read and heard and talked to a few people around that, and there's just no way out for him to look good, and to blame Iowa for whatever you want to blame Iowa for, it just doesn't make sense. Whether it's, they didn't promote me, and I saw something about they didn't provide him with a tutor. Are you kidding me? An AAU institution in the Big Ten Conference not providing you with a tutor. You're a 5-star. Are you kidding me? Come on, man. I don't have time for that crap. I don't know why anybody would believe him if he said that. Now, he's going to go on to the NFL in a couple of years and move on. But I think the one thing you can say is, yes, talent-wise, it's hard to look at Mason Richmond and say, NFL first rounder, whereas you can with Caden Proctor. But you know what? This dude has fought through more wars than any other left tackle since at least Alaric Jackson. And great attitude, great young man. He's going to be there to battle. He's probably an NFL guard. They'll kick him
That's
inside.
what he said. Yeah, that's what he said. Yep.
The arm length is real for him. But it doesn't matter, And I think the one thing is, when you got a quick passing game, that his limitations are masked a little bit more. I think he's a stand-up person, could be a captain if they want him to be, or if they vote him that way. He looks to me to be, offensive captain material. And now I'll say this, about LaShawn Williams leading the league in rushing. I'm not so sure.
Well, I just think it's going to be more committee.
Yeah.
I think every week it could be different. Who leads Iowa?
Because it's more because of everybody else.
Yeah, right.
Quinshon Jenkins and Trayvon Henderson and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. That's just 4 running backs for 2 different teams, and there's plenty of others. Donovan Edwards in Michigan. I mean, I'm not disparaging LaShawn at all, but there's some pretty good freaking running back. Darius Taylor at Minnesota is really good. So anyway, but if he gets 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, he's a good player. No question.
Absolutely. All right. Question number 3 is Iowa's defensive line deep enough to both stop the run and generate a pass rush, Scott? That's a big off-season question. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. This is the one area where I do have some concern. I'm not like passing game level concern, but they need to get a couple of guys in there. And I know our friend Tom Kakert had Kelvin Bell on a podcast. I got to listen to it on the flight. It was great. Recommended it for all you guys out there. He brought up a couple other guys, Will Hubert, Gaffney, I think, was it Gaffney was another one, and Jeff Bowie as people who could be those, 8, 9, 7, 8, or 9 type players. But, here's the question, the question lingering, that we see the talent in a guy like Aaron Graves, Brian Allen, but they got to do it now. They got to go from being, in Graves' case, a rotational guy to a starter. In Allen's case, being a guy who did it great on Kids Day to being a guy who can do it for 25 snaps a game this fall. And they only have 2 guys that have started games, and it's 1 year's worth. However, I do think Deontay Craig and Y.A. Black could be 2 of the 10 best defensive linemen in the Big Ten. And I think Aaron Graves is right there with them. And I think Ethan Hurkett is just kind of like that Parker Hesse type, a try hard that's just, hey, he had 2 of the biggest plays of the season last year. The stop on 4th down at Iowa State, and then the interception against Nebraska that won the game, and so they're capable. But I am concerned what happens when somebody can't go for a week.
Right.
And that next week is Ohio State week or Minnesota week, or take your pick on whatever team. Then I'm like, 7, 8, 9, can they go from being 10 plays, 12 snaps a game to 35 and without getting blown up in the 4th quarter? I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I'm with you on the concern level. That's the one thing I've been pointing out all along is if something happens to either Y.A. Black or Aaron Graves, you're hurting on depth a little bit. Jeremiah Pittman would be the 3rd D tackle right now, but based on that podcast, I listened to the whole thing too. It was great, really good. I really recommend it, just on a lot of levels. Give more background on Kelvin's story. Really, really good, really good. But even he didn't feel like I heard a lot of trust in anyone behind Pittman necessarily to go on the field yet, and so that's you've had a lot of luxury at that position, even without Noah Shannon, where you've had a Logan Lee, just a stalwart there, for 4 years basically, and you don't have that anymore. So Y.A. Black's got to stay healthy. Aaron Graves, I kind of think he can stay healthy, but you still got to grind out maybe 60 snaps a game in these big games, and it's asking a lot. So that's where I'm concerned there, Scott, and I am. The pass rush, that's where I think Iowa was weaker last year, and that's where I don't think that's why the turnovers were lower. The interceptions were lower because they didn't have that, big guy off the edge, that Epinesa type.
Yeah.
To come, even an Anthony Nelson, just, somebody like that, or Golston, didn't have that guy coming off the edge. Joe Evans was great. Again, hustle play, some hustle sacks in there. He was, an epic walk on to kind of star story there. But, Herkett has one career sack.
Mm-hmm.
Craig was banged up. So let's see those guys do it. So of these three questions, Scott, this is probably my biggest concern of the three, honestly.
Really? I would put it at number 2 for me. I would put passing game number 1.
We put the bar at passable.
Yeah, I know, but still getting to passable after being, insert whatever word you want to describe it. It was just, I don't even want to touch it because I'll say a bad word or something. But that's that category. But I do think that this one is concerning, and more heightened concern than even the running game on offense, because Iowa relies so heavily on its defense, and its defense is winning games for it. But what does that look like? And in which games is it going to matter, if it does matter? And like last year, you look at they were 17th in rush yards. That was only 111. And then they were 10th in yards per carry at 3.14. And considering they were on the field as much as they were, those are pretty damn good numbers. Now, as you mentioned, with the one thing they didn't have was that explosive edge rusher. They didn't have that guy who could go out and collapse the pocket, create, movement from the quarterback. Joe is undersized, and in Iowa's defense, he was probably built more for Wisconsin's defense, frankly. Stand up, move around, do some things, rather than be that fight the heavy 5 and play a 2 gap at his size. I mean, he was outweighed by 80 pounds, going head up, and he's still able to do what he did, which is pretty remarkable. But they're going to need another guy, whether that's, and that could be Caden Crawford, or it could be Brian Allen becoming a guy, or, and the one thing that Phil has shown in the last 5 to 6 years is more creativity. And that could be, hey, maybe Joseph Anderson walks into camp and his burst is so good that I know he's only 225 pounds or whatever, but we're going to need that on third down. And maybe Ethan Herkett, you go inside the way Parker Hesse did, and Joe Anderson, you go in there and just get after the quarterback. Don't even worry about 2 gapping. We're not going to let you worry about that, because the technique's nowhere near there. But I do think, like out of my defense, I have 2 defensive markers to me that stand out most of all. And for Iowa, it's stop the run. And it's not even 1A and 1B. It's 1A and 1A. And the other one is limit explosive plays, which they have done so well. And it is the key. I mean, here are the numbers for that. Over the last 11 years, if they give up 2 or less plays of 25 plus yards, then that they give up an average of 13.9 points per game, and they're 74 and 26. If it's 3 or more, then they give up an average of 23.9 points a game, and they're 22 and 19. So it's, if they limit the big plays, which basically says that way we could still play only 7 at the line of scrimmage, because that's what they want to play, and 2 gap up front, stop the run, then they can be a boa constrictor on the back end and then squeeze the life out of the opponent and force them to make a mistake. So I don't think it was much as the secondary. I think it was the up front that caused my other 2 markers are turnover margin and penalties, and being -7 is a WTF moment for Iowa.
Yeah.
And they're 114th in the country, and they only got 10 interceptions, but it's because they didn't get a lot of disruption up front.
Right. Exactly. That's why it is a concern for me, but you kind of talked me off a little bit there, because, you do have Phil Parker, you do have Seth Wallace, you do have Kelvin Bell on that side of the ball. As Phil said in the spring, we'll find someone. Yeah. So, this is where you need a development story like Max Llewellyn, for example. Great physical gifts. Can you take that next step? Somebody like that to just be, just keep shuttling these defensive ends in there. Keep those fresh legs coming. Like you said, I think last week, Brian Allen is one of your guys you want to see a lot from. So can he be that fourth rush end? So, yeah, this is a huge period for all that. Fall camp's going to be massive for that defensive line for sure. All right. Bonus question, Scott. If Iowa can answer all three of these questions affirmatively, which isn't like that far of a reach, I don't think. How high can the Hawkeyes fly? And that might dovetail into our next topic.
It based on their record, on the opponents that they go through, and I'm going to just kind of, I'm not going to break down the schedule, but I'm just going to kind of mention the names here. Illinois State at home, Iowa State at home, Troy at home. By the way, Troy was a really good Group of 5 team last year, won 10 games. At Minnesota, bye. At the Ohio State University. Washington at home, at Michigan State, Northwestern and Wisconsin at home, at UCLA, which I call UCLA, bye. At Maryland, Nebraska. When you look at that, if I was able to run the ball, let's say for 4.4 yards per carry, if I was able to complete close to 60 or above 60% of its passes, if I was able to stay relatively healthy on the defensive line and stop the run, you're looking at 11-1. If they're deficient in some of those areas or other areas pop up, like 4 interception games on offense, then you got issues. But I would say if the other numbers stay relatively even, not anything too critical, 10-2 or 11-1 is certainly capable of ending up. I am nowhere near going to predict them to go win in Ohio State, because I would pick nobody to beat Ohio State until at least the playoff. But I think they can win, that they would be the better team walking into every other game on their schedule.
Yeah, it is an exciting proposition to think about, because the schedule lays out pretty nicely for them. The returning guys lay out nicely, and they really don't have like these are the questions that they have. I know the offense, is a big question, but they've got a lot of questions answered coming into the season, which a lot of times in the Kirk Ferentz era, you don't have, it's just part of the deal. September's, you figure that stuff out, and then by October you're good. But they, they've got some tough games in September this year, and are very early. The first 5 games, 3 of them are going to be pretty tough. They might, 4 of them might be tough, but 3 of them are going to be really tough. So, it is important to start fast and be presentable for the playoff. I'm with you. I think, you've talked about the luck factor a little bit. I think even if they answer all these questions, man, it's hard to picture them going 11-1. I think they're probably, you have to probably get some bad luck in there somewhere and lose a game. But, I do think 10-2 is realistic if they can just answer those questions. And as we talked about last week, 10-2 is right there, probably in that 12, 11, 12, 13, 14 range, so they'll be in the discussion. It'll be an exciting season for sure. I would just add to that, that, last year they were 10-2 in the regular season, and they had horrific luck in one game, but they really won the margin games in the rest. They won the close games. They held on. A lot of times in Kirk Ferentz's tenure or in Iowa's history, even when they've been good or not, that those games sometimes swing the next year. The 3-point win this year is a 3-point loss the next year. How do you mitigate that? Well, you get better in the areas where you're deficient and hold steady in the other ones. Like I think about like 09 and 10. In 09 they were 11-2 and they won all these games, and they're the cardiac Hawkeyes. They're just like, every game was like, I don't know, people, I don't know if I can live like this. This team's driving me crazy. And then you had, Ricky Stanzi go down and, lose some games. But then the next year they were better. They had no depth. And then when they had areas like linebacker, they were down to 5, 6, and 7 playing linebacker. And back then they didn't move guys around, and they didn't have a cash. And Norm Parker was a brilliant coordinator, so I'm not going to knock him at all. But that would have been the time to use the cash, would have been in some of these games where in every single one of their losses, they either were tied or had the lead and 5 minutes to go, and the defense gave it up. So,
Maybe against Dane Sanzenbacher, you might want to have him on, have Jordan Bernstein or somebody on instead of anyway.
But we're going back here.
I know, but my point is that those games sometimes swing the other way. But the reason for that was they had 5 defensive linemen that they played.
Right.
They had 3 of their top linebackers out. Offensive line had some depth issues at times. That's what I see with this team is I don't think offensive line depth is going to be an issue this year. Next year it will be, but not this year. Barring major injuries, tight end should be fine. Running back should be fine. Quarterback's in a better spot this year. Wide receiver, I don't know yet. I'm reserved judgment. Defensive line, a little bit worse than last year because of that. They've got 4 guys that you think they're capable, 3 guys you're hopeful for. You really want more guys that you have trust in. And then linebacker, they're set. There's no question there. But in secondary, the same deal. Now, how do they compensate if their pass rush doesn't get off? Or do they move a linebacker to pass rush situation only? Maybe one of the true freshmen. They're great athletes. That it's like, again, third down, we're putting you in. Joseph Anderson, Cam Buffington, somebody like that. Derek Leistikow, you're off the edge. Don't worry about this. Just go get the quarterback. Impact the play. So, but with that schedule, there's no Michigan, there's no Penn State, there's no Oregon.
Right.
You're playing Wisconsin at home. I think Nebraska might have a chance to be okay, and you play them at home. And Washington going all the way out there might be a tough one, even with as much attrition as they have. Coming to Iowa, that's steel cage match territory for the Hawkeyes. So anyway, I can see if they make strides in those areas, I could see them being 11-1 and ending up in the inaugural 12-team playoff.
Well, Barry, before we get to that, Scott, let's raise a glass to Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Steeple Ridge delivers a high-quality, delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. High-end bourbon here, folks. Distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. We thank them very much for sponsoring Legends and Listeners, sticking with us through the summer, through the horse latitude, Scott. Let's get into, so you're, as you mentioned at the top of the show, you are coming back from your athletic summit, and it sounds like the college football playoff was a big talking point, and I think it's a good time now to mentally, get people prepared for this 12-team playoff and how it's going to change the season. So what are the big changes you see in how we kind of view this season, week by week? I don't think it's going to be, I don't think people are going to get jazzed up about bowl talk, between the Outback and the Reliant West and the Music City or whatever. Like, this is all about, even if you lose a couple early, you still got a shot to make that playoff. And that's where I think the whole conversation is going to be about, especially with this Iowa team. Like, you have a chance.
You have a chance because basically, if you're in the top 10 at the season's end, you probably are in. There might be a team or two that, let's just start with the basics, which are 12 teams get in. The top 4 champions from leagues have the top 4 buys, and they automatically qualify. They don't have to play in the first round, so they get a bye to the quarterfinals. One other champion, for the group of 5 is guaranteed, along with the Power 4 to all qualify. And then there are 7 at-large bids. Now, you got Notre Dame that counts as that. They're not a champion. They do not, even if they're undefeated, their best they can do is number 5. On the weekend of the 19th and 20th of December, 2 weeks after Championship Saturday, or 13 days after, if you're talking about Friday, 1 Friday game, 3 Saturday games on home campuses. 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, 7 versus 10, 8 versus 9. 2 are on TNT, 2 are on ESPN/ABC. those will be a selection committee will determine all those spots. There's going to be a couple of spots that you're going to be like, this is where it gets hairy. It's going to be, let's say, Iowa 10-2, Penn State 10-2. They didn't play each other. How did they do against Ohio State? And then you throw in a Tennessee, a second team from the Big 12. That's where this is going to be a jostle. And that's why you've got to win these games. And when you're looking at all of this, the most likely scenario that would drive Iowa fans beyond raging is to beat Iowa State in week 2. But Iowa State goes and wins the Big 12, which I think they have the most returning production from last year of any team in the country. They have a 3,000-yard passer returning. And yet, so if Iowa wins 17-13 in Iowa City and Iowa State still wins the Big 12, Iowa goes 10-2 and gets left out as the top team not in the playoff. Iowa State could be not only in the playoff, but getting a bye in the first round. Now, after the four teams are played, host sites again. So if your team 5 through 8, you get to host a game. So if Iowa's number 8, they're playing number 9 at home. Ole Miss comes to Iowa City in the middle of December, type of thing, or Notre Dame.
That'd be crazy.
It's instantly the biggest game in Kinnick Stadium history.
Yeah,
and then after that, the winners then will play by seed, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But those are in bowl sites.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the Fiesta Bowl will be on.
Basically, becomes the New Year's 6.
Yeah,
starting in that round, right?
Right.
You got 4, 2, 1.
Yeah, and then you got the 2, and then which will be a week later, a week and a half later. It'll be on a Thursday, Friday, and then you have the championship, which will be on the 20th of January at a neutral site. So, if Iowa, let's say Iowa is the number 7 team, they get in, they're number 7. They're hosting Ole Miss at Kinnick Stadium, and it's just too damn cold for those Rebels. And so they win. And then they're playing.
Damn.
I'm damn SEC football. But then they end up playing number 2, Clemson or Florida State. Let's say Florida State.
Florida State. Okay.
Yeah, and if it's 2, then they might be playing. Could be playing like in the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
Like
is that one of the quarters?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because the Orange is one of the semis, Orange and Cotton are the semis, and
then
they play
that Friday night game. Maybe is it a Friday?
Which the semifinal or the
quarters?
Well, the quarters are New Year's Eve, one game on New Year's Eve, and 3 on New Year's Day.
Okay.
And then the other bowl games that used to be New Year's Day, like the Citrus and the Relia Quest, that they moved to New Year's Eve. But anyway. Then if you win that, then you could be playing in the Cotton Bowl or the Orange Bowl, and then if you win that, you go to the national championship game. And I think it's Atlanta this year too. So, or if you're the number 10 seed, then you're going on the road in the first round, and then you could go on the road again and again and again. So it could be a very expensive tournament. But anyway, that's kind of I don't know if Cliff Notes is the right way. It's kind of the description of the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. And one thing, as you were talking there, Scott, is like even the losses you're gonna want to be impressive in. You're not gonna want to get blown out, 54-10 in Columbus like you did a couple years ago. You're gonna want to, you want to keep it close, because you want that 10-2 to look better. You can get in with a 10-2 to the Citrus over the Outback because you travel well or something, maybe, or win the Big Ten West, because you're in the Big Ten West. But it's just different. It's different. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to kind of see how it all shapes up. I hope that, I guess for a team like Iowa, I feel like it's a really good thing. It's an improvement. I feel like the teams, I don't know. How do you feel? Like, I feel like the teams like the other Big Ten teams, that we're going to be covering also, like the Ohio States of the world. I guess it's good that they're getting in, but it's also, they got to win at least 3 games, to win the national title, even if they're really good, as opposed to, it's just you're more ripe for an upset somewhere, potentially at some point in time. And it's gonna be some good drama, and you got to get hot. You got to get hot too, like that. Like you can't be a number 2 Ohio State and face whoever the 7 is and like have an off day.
Yeah, right.
In a bowl game setting, like that's, and then you got to win 2 more after that. So it's
right.
We've seen it's hard to go undefeated, man.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And now when you're talking about the expanded SEC and Big Ten, when you have more teams of not that have talent and history, and you're talking about USC, and USC hasn't been very good last year. Last year they weren't real good, but they're also capable because they have athletes. And when you have 5 stars, it's hard to corral those in a lot of cases. And that's where in Iowa, this is why before, when we go back to the BCS, that was Iowa's best chance. Like 02 was Iowa's best chance. 09 would have been Iowa's best chance because it's a 1-game winner take all. And you had a month to prepare for, just like they shredded Georgia Tech because Norm knew how to prepare for Georgia Tech, and they were able to do that. But when you're playing a USC like they did in 02 and they weren't prepared for that, and then you see the talent disparity in certain spots, it was like, okay, I get it. And that's what you're going to run into if you're playing Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia consecutively. The talent level, there's a disparity. So I think what this does, though, Chad, is every year it's like the focus for Iowa fans, I've always felt, has not been on winning the national title, but it's winning the Big Ten / getting into a New Year's Six Bowl. And this is the equivalent, except the New Year's Six Bowls have become consolation prizes for the last however many years. I mean, players are opting out. One year when we were down at the Citrus Bowl, Chad, and we were watching, I think it was Pitt and Michigan State, and they're playing in the Peach Bowl. And Michigan State had Kenneth Walker III, and Pitt had Kenny Pickett, and they both dropped out. And it became a, nothing game. Nobody's dropping out now. This, why would you drop out? I mean, if you do that, people will question your competitiveness. And that game's going to be at East Lansing, or it's going to be in Pittsburgh, or maybe it gets moved to Ford Field or something like that. I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit, but I do think this is the most impactful competitive change we've ever seen in the history of the sport.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Can't wait. Just like a month away now from Big Ten Media Days, so it's coming. It's coming fast. Good show. Good show, Scott. Just heads up, the next 3 weeks are going to be a little bit different. Probably have one podcast with us together, one podcast where Scott will have a guest, and one podcast where I'm going to have a guest. At least that's the tentative plan. So stay tuned for that. We don't know which one's going to be where or whatever, but we're thankful you guys are flexible and nimble, and good to join you on this Friday, Scott.
Great to join you too, Chad, and hope everybody's enjoying their summer, and it'll be over before you know it.
Yeah, and well, we don't get into the WNBA today, but the Fever are actually hot now, so maybe it's a little bit more exciting.
Won 4 straight games at home, and I don't know if people are running out of things to complain about Caitlin about when she's damn near getting triple doubles every game now.
I'll find something, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, right.
All right, for Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Thank you for joining us on Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios. Talk to you next time here on the Iowa Everywhere Network.